Hare Krishna. So, I wanted to start today by seeing, before I start speaking at all, does anyone have any question about anything in Krishna consciousness? Sometimes people have a good question and it's more relevant than what I was planning to speak about. So does anybody have any question about spiritual life, about Krishna consciousness, about ISKCON, or anything of this, that type? All right. So we've got a reticent crowd. I'm already on a bad start. Yeah.
Just to give a question.
Yeah.
Some people say don't follow an organized religion. So we are this kind of organization, and we have an organized system of worship. So why should we follow that?
Why should we follow an organized system? There's a joke, actually, in the Christian circles that Jesus created the Christian religion. And he said, now I've established religion. And the devil came to Jesus and said, let me organize that for you. So it's sometimes like that. Organizations have a bad name, and for good reasons, for realistic reasons. But to be part of a religion that isn't organized is actually to not be a part of anything. You know, if unless there's an organization, unless there is some standard by which you measure what is and what is not the religion, then really you don't have a religion. You have a group of people who all believe different things, and they're all doing different things. But Krishna consciousness actually has a organized system. So, and we are organized to some extent. You know, we're like most organizations. Most organizations aren't as organized as they would like you to think they are. That doesn't just apply to religions, but it applies to all organizations. So organizations have their, you know, problems, and if we follow an organization, that means we can work together with other people. If we don't make ourselves part of an organization, or we don't have a core set of beliefs or a core set of methods, then it's not really an organization. We just have a group of people who sometimes come together and do some similar things, and each one is doing something different. But the Vedas, they give us actual methods or techniques, which is what the Bhagavad Gita is about. It explains how to become a devotee of Krishna. You know, otherwise we can guess or we can try something, but if we don't have a method, it's not likely we'll get very far. We'll be very, not very far advanced in creating a method or following any method, and we won't make any progress in spiritual life. So that's how I would reply to that. Actually, there's a funny story. I was there one time. The devotees were trying to buy a plot of land in Pennsylvania. The New Vrindavan devotees were trying to buy a plot of land in Pennsylvania. It was in a place called Jim Thorpe, which is named after a famous sports star. And this was the first time I actually saw an agitator in action, you know, where, you know, the devotees were explaining what they planned to do. They were going to try to set up a farm, et cetera, et cetera. And somebody stood up, and what he said was very choreographed. It was like he knew exactly what to say and how to say it. He wasn't just some guy that was spouting off the top of his head. So he was either a trained agitator or some member of the CIA or something like, or FBI or something like that. And he said, these people are not what they say they are. They're a cult. And he held up a picture of the temple of of the New Vrindavan temple, and there was a picture of it. He said, "This does not exist. This is a photoshopped picture. You know, it obviously does exist, but he knew exactly how to speak." And he said, these people are wrong, and you're going to have another organized religion. And so there was a man who stood up, you know, and he said to this, "I don't know who you are, but I don't believe a word you say." And this man said, I like these Hare Krishna people, and one thing I know is that they're not an organized religion. And of course, we all smiled when he said that, because, you know, it kind of was true in a certain sense. But at any rate, I'll end with that, because I'll get on to what I wanted to kind of talk about today. So in Bhagavad Gita, we have in the 13th chapter, of Bhagavad Gita. Does anybody know what the name of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is? It's got a mysterious name. It's called Nature, Enjoyer, and Consciousness. Now, what in the world does that even mean? You know, nature, enjoyer, and consciousness. Well, in chapter 13, it starts off with Arjuna asking a question. And he asks about, I want to know about Prakriti and Purusha. I want to know about Jnanam and Gyayam. And I want to know about Kshetra and Kshetragya. So he asks for 6 Sanskrit terms to be defined by Krishna. So in chapter 13, Krishna will explain 6 Sanskrit words, what they mean, and he elaborates. Now, I'm trying to pare things down so that I don't overwhelm everybody. So this is why I'm trying to stay really simple today. I probably won't be able to, but I'm going to give it a good shot today. So we're not going to talk about really anything other than the idea of Jnanam and, not Jnanam, but Kshetra and Kshetragya. What is Kshetra and what is Kshetragya? So I'll read the verse. This is 13:1 and 2. In verse 1, Arjuna asks the question. In verse 2, Krishna begins the answer. Arjuna uvacha prakritim purusham chaiva kshetram kshetragyam evacha etad veditum ichchami Jnanam Gyayam Chakeshava. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Idam Shariram Konteya Kshetram Iti Abhidiyate Etadyo Veti Tang Prahu Kshetragya Iti Tad Viddaha. So this translates, Arjuna said, "O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." So he's asking these 6 terms, Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam, Gyayam, Purusha, and Prakriti. He's asking about those Sanskrit terms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field. And one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." So the body is the field, and the Kshetragya is the knower of the field. So why does this even concern us? So let me ask you all a question, and I'm going to require you to answer. So, are we the same as God?
No.
Okay, who said that? Okay, okay, good. Anybody have any other opinions?
Yes and no.
Yes, no, okay. Right. Why do we sometimes say yes and no? Can anyone explain that? Why do we sometimes say yes and sometimes we say no?
Because of the minute independence given to us by Krishna.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm supposed to give this so that. Yeah. So please.
Is it because of the minute independence given to us by Krishna?
No, not exactly. So there are several conceptions of God in the everyday world. If we're not talking about just Hare Krishna, we're talking about the whole wide world. Now, some people think that God is one. So there's the one, and everybody is just a piece of God. And when we become finally liberated, we merge into God like a drop of water falling into an ocean. And a drop of water falls in the ocean, it becomes part of the ocean. There's no separate drop anymore. So that's one concept. Another concept is that God is fragments. We are all fragments of God, and God one time was a whole thing. He was complete oneness. And then he broke into tiny fragments. We are those tiny fragments. And we will remain that way. Another concept of God that's quite common in the world is that God is some kind of energy. In other words, he is not exactly a person, he's some kind of energy. And he controls the universe, or at least got it started. And the universe is the same as God. So that's another idea. Of course, one of the more modern popular ideas is God is just a concept that's a fictional concept. There is no God. There's just some idea in some people's minds. So these are all concepts. But the Krishna conscious concept is different than all of these. So can anybody explain to me what the actual Krishna conscious concept of God is? Anybody can say. Now, Jamuna said yes and no. So how do we explain the yes and no? Yes, give him the microphone, the recording.
Aren't we all God and Krishna? Aren't we all God?
We are all emanated from God. That's why we say yes. But why do we also say no? Yes.
God is complete.
Give it.
Only God is complete, and he has all the qualities, and a human do not possess those
Right,
qualities.
right. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay. So you can give that to Keshav and he can hand it to people when they speak. All right, so this is why we're talking about this 13th chapter. 13th chapter is called Nature, Enjoyer, and Consciousness. So nature is Prakriti, the enjoyer is Purusha, and consciousness subsums as Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam, and Gyayam. So these are Sanskrit terms, and the reason we care about them is so we can understand what God actually is and not have some fuzzy idea to think that God is just an energy, or he's fragmented and we are all pieces of him, or that he is the one and that's all there is the one, or that God is a fiction, or any of these concepts. These are all common concepts of God, and the Krishna conscious concept is none of these. So Lord Chaitanya, he explained a principle, and he called it Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. So can someone tell me what that means, Achintya Beda Beda Tattva? What does that mean? Well, give him you got to be on your toes here.
It means simultaneously one and different.
Yes. But there's one more word there. Achintya means what? No, beta means one. Beta means different, and abeta means not different.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable. Right. So we are inconceivably one and different from God. So we are the same as God, and we are also not the same as God. And that fact that both of those things can be possible, that we can say yes and no at the same time, is inconceivable. But it's not completely inconceivable. In fact, it's explained in the 13th chapter. You know, in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada explains that Bhagavad Gita covers 5 subjects. That is, Ishvara, the Supreme Lord; Jiva, the living entity, you and me; Prakriti, material nature. It also talks about Kala, which is time, and it talks about karma. These 5 things are explained in Bhagavad Gita. Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, and karma. And of those 5 things, 4 are eternal, but 1 is not. And that is karma. So Ishvara is eternal. He exists always and everywhere at all times. The Jiva, you and me, we are also eternal. That not only is God eternal, but we are also eternal. Not only are we eternal into the future, but we are eternal in the past as well. We've always existed, but we don't remember what we've done before this lifetime. So we are eternal too. Now, Prakriti, material nature, is also eternal, but it's intermittent. It comes and goes. Prabhupada uses the example of like a cloud. Sometimes you see it, and sometimes the sun shines and the cloud goes away. But then again, there'll be another cloud. So the material nature cycles. Krishna, as Mahavishnu, exhales, all the universes come out, material nature exists for a long time, 411 trillion years or something like that. And then he inhales and it all gets absorbed back in. And everybody that's alive at that time, all the living entities, they all become nicely sleeping in the body of Mahavishnu for an equal 411 trillion years. Then he breathes out again and all the universes come back. So there's this constant creation and annihilation of the universe over a huge time scale. So that's how the material nature works. But it is permanent in the sense that there'll always be Prakriti. Kala, time, that also exists as long as the material universe exists. In the spiritual world, there is time also, but it's not the same as the time we have in this world, in this material world. So finally, karma, that is our cycle of past sins and merits that we've done. So we're suffering according to what we've done in the past, and we're also enjoying according to what we've done in the past. And that will end when we purify ourselves of material consciousness, our identification with the body. So now we're getting back to this verse, this Kshetra and Kshetrakya. So Kshetra is the body. We are not our bodies. We are living in this body. So the body is a vehicle or a vessel, and it's made of material energy. And that material energy is gross, earth, water, fire, air, ether, gross aspects like the carbon, oxygen, and all those particles that the body is made of. At the same time, the body has elements that are not gross matter. They are subtle matter, which is mind, intelligence, and false ego. So there are 8 material energies that are described in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kamana buddharevacha ahankara itiyame binna prakriti ashtada. So there are 8 energies. 5 of them are material, the ones that the scientists study: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, or in modern terminology, solid, liquid, radiant energy, gaseous, and the time-space continuum. These are more modern terms for earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So that's what the scientists are contacting. But they never deal with mind, intelligence, and false ego. But the human being is also, the body we live in also contains these subtle elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. So when we finally purify ourselves, we are freed from our false mind, our false intelligence, and false ego. And in that time, then we have surpassed karma, and we will return to the spiritual world. Now, that's again not what I had really planned to talk about. What I want to talk about is, what is this kshetra and kshetragya? Kshetra is the body. Now, for simplicity's sake, I call the body the little machine. So we are each in a particular body. It's a machine. And Krishna explains that it's made, the living entity is seated as if on a machine made of material energy. So the living entity is riding the machine. Where is the living entity riding? It's riding in the heart. And what we call death is a separation from the material energy, from the body, the small machine. At the time of death, we have the subtle body and the self proper, the soul, the subtle body and the soul, both separate from the gross body. The gross body becomes stinky and we have to do something with it. We burn it or give it to animals, or we bury it, one of those kind of things. So the body, when it separates from the subtle body and the soul, we call that death. And the subtle body and the soul, they travel on through karma and reincarnation to a new body somewhere else. They get planted in the womb of some female. It could be a human, or it could be some other species. So the body returns to the material elements. It's a machine. It's Prakriti. It's the small machine. But we're also in a big machine, which is the material universe. It's bigger than our body. And similarly, just like we don't have control over the big machine, we only can maneuver around it and control it in slight ways to a little bit. We don't even have full control over the small machine, our own body. Now, when we talk about kshetra and kshetragya, kshetra is the small machine. Kshetragya is the knower of that machine, which is the individual self. He is the knower of the machine. We experience the body, the small machine. And that body experiences the big machine, the material world, the external world. So that is called Prakriti. So the big machine is Prakriti, or material nature. The small machine is the kshetra, or the field. Now, sometimes in some places they do talk about the big machine and the small machine both being Prakriti, so that's also there. But just understand that that distinction is there. We're in a little machine, our bodies, and that body is walking around in the big machine, material nature, the gross material world, and all of its planets and everything. So, now, to go a little further, we find that there is a knower of the body, Kshetra means field, and Gya means to know. So one who knows the field. But there is a knower in all bodies. So Krishna is the knower in all bodies. We're the knower of only one body. So I know what pains and aches I have, but you don't. You don't have any idea. Similarly, I don't have any idea what's going on in your body, you know. So I know what I'm thinking, but I don't have any idea unless you tell me what's going on in your mind. So we are the knower in one machine, one small machine, one body. But Krishna is the knower in all bodies. So he is the Kshetragya of all bodies. Now, I just read you verses 1 and 2 of the 13th chapter. So, verse 3 says, Kshetragyam chapimam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra gayor jnanam yattajjanam matam mama. O sign of Bharata, you should know that I am also the knower in all bodies. You should understand this body and its knower, and that is called knowledge. This is my opinion. So, Krishna generally, in Bhagavad Gita, you see, it's mostly Krishna talking. Biggest portion of Bhagavad Gita is Krishna talking. There are places where Arjuna talks, but mostly he's asking questions. The very first of it, he's making some statements in the first and second chapter. But after the first and second chapter, sometimes Krishna asks a question. And when Arjuna asks a question, Krishna usually gives a one-sentence answer. And then he kind of expands it a little bit further on. And in this case, he's saying that I am the knower in all bodies. So, Arjuna, you are the knower in one body, but I am the knower in all bodies. So, this is why we say that we are God, but we are also not God. We are coming from Krishna, there's no doubt about it, but we are not the complete one. And in Vaishnava theology, we understand that we will never become God. What we can become is a servant of God. We cannot become God. We can become a servant of God. So there are people who teach that you can become one with God. And the Vedas agree that that is possible. However, the way that you become one with God is you merge into Brahman, which is sometimes in modern language called the white light. So the white light, the energy of the Supreme Lord, is emanating from Krishna. And when you merge with it, you lose your individual form. You do not cease to exist. Because as we were saying, that the living entity is eternal and Krishna is eternal. We continue to live even after death. We continued to live before this life. We were existing in the past forever. And even if we merge with God and become one with Brahman, we still continue as an individual, although our individual consciousness is suppressed. And we have no individual sense of form and passage of time. Because try to understand, it's not difficult to understand. If you merge with Brahman, what has exactly happened? Your material body and even your subtle body, your form, is suppressed. And you are just in this white glow. There's nothing above you except white. There's nothing in front of you except white. There's nothing below you except white. There's nothing behind you except white. There's nothing in front of you except for white. And as time goes on, nothing changes. It doesn't start to become something else. It doesn't switch colors or it doesn't create forms. You just go on like that. Now, the good thing is that in that condition, you do not suffer. However, there is no variety. However, there is no activity. However, time essentially doesn't exist because nothing is taking place. Now, most of us probably wouldn't volunteer for that kind of reality. Sounds very boring, and it is. And that's why people can't stay there. So the Vedas inform us that if you make an effort to merge with Brahman, if you make that effort, you can do it. However, you can't stay there because the living entity is an individual and wants relationships and wants activity. And there are no relationships in the All One or the Brahman, and there's no activity there. So eventually the living entity comes out. So there's a verse, Ye ne ravandaksha vimukta manina swayashtabhava abhibuddha sudaya, that there are those whose intelligence they think is pure, but it actually is not. They merge with Brahman, but they have to fall back down because there's nothing going on. And the individual hungers for activity and it hungers for relationship. So even if they remain in the Brahman for millions of years, they'll want to come out. So you can merge with God, but even then you're not completely merged with God. You are a tiny part. You do not experience the whole universe at the same time the way God does. So Krishna knows what's going on in everybody's mind. He knows what's going on in every atom. He knows what's going on in every planet. He knows what's going on in the subtle world. He knows what's going on in the spiritual world. He's simultaneously aware of everything, which we do not have a consciousness like that. So this is why we are coming from God, there's no doubt about it, but we are not equal to God. So Prabhupada uses a number of different metaphors. So the hand, is it the body? The answer is yes. Is it the whole body? No. It's just a part of the body. Similarly, we can say that we have a sheet of cloth, and we can look at one spot or one part of it. That's a piece of the cloth, but it's not the whole cloth. Similarly, we can say, another example or analogy that's used, is that we have the drop of water that comes from the ocean, and we have the ocean. So if we look at the chemical properties of the drop of water, we can analyze them, and there'll be a similar amount of dissolved hydrogen, some trace minerals. You'll have salt. You'll have a number of other dissolved chemicals in the drop and in the ocean. And you'll have them in the same proportion. But you can float a battleship in the ocean, but you cannot float a battleship in a drop of water. So in the same way, we are a part or particle of God, but we are not the whole God. We are not God the whole. We are only God the part. And so our relationship is not that we want to blend or merge into God. Rather, we want to become a servant of God. And by serving God, that we can do forever. And that has form, that has relationship, and it is actually changing over time. I mean, if there was a machine in the corner of this room, and you went in there and it would immediately put you in Brahman, and you would be there forever. I think I'd think twice about going into the machine because there's nothing going on there. But to be a servant of God means that you have relationship and you are doing things. And so this is what we mean by the knower of all bodies. So Krishna is the Parama Kshetriya. He knows what's going on every kshetra. But we only know what's going on in one. And there are a number of different things between us and God. God is great. We are tiny. God is considered Vibhu, which is massive or beyond comprehension. And we are Anu, which is infinitesimal. This soul is tiny. This is described in the Vedas as being 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. So that's the dimension of the soul. However, when the soul returns to the spiritual world, it blossoms out and becomes its full size as a living being in relationship with the Supreme. So in the spiritual world, we have a form, but right now our soul is compressed into what's like a tiny spark. And that spark is in a body. It may be in a woman's body, it may be in a man's body, it may be in an American body, it may be in an Indian body, it may be in a Caribbean body, it may be in any kind of body. But at death, we get up and change chairs. We get to a different body. So the soul is the occupier of that body. And Krishna is the knower in all bodies, as he says in the third verse of the 13th chapter. So this means that there are a number of other ways where Krishna is different than us. For one, Krishna remembers all of his lifetimes, whatever incarnation he is involved in, and he has limitless incarnations. He knows them all inside and out. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that I remember both you and I have existed forever. I remember all these lives, but you do not, Arjuna. So we do not remember our past incarnations, but Krishna does. Another thing is Krishna is the master and we are all servants. So if we learn that our way to be happy is to learn how to give ourselves to Krishna, even though we're conditioned to want to think, I don't want to be a servant. I want to be the master. I want to be the big gun. But we never become happy that way. So that's another way that Krishna is different than us. And there's this verse, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Arsabha Britya, that Krishna is one Ishvara or controller and everyone else is Britya or servant. Another way Krishna is different is that Krishna is the overseer and permitter of everything in the Prakriti, in the whole material universe. So the living entity, he has desires, and the living entity, because of his desires to move arms and legs and eyes and mouth, and because he desires to do that, the super soul cooperates by moving the body. We are not actually even in control of our own bodies, what to speak of the rest of the universe. We're very tiny, and the super soul reads the desires in our heart, and he sometimes cooperates with what we desire to do by moving our body. And therefore, if we have a certain kind of karma, we sometimes accomplish the things we set out to do by moving our body, either by speech or by action, and sometimes not. Two people start to open a business. One of them does successfully, the other one fails and goes into horrible debt, because the karma is different. For one person, the karma is good. For another person, the karma is not good. So the Supreme Lord is the Upadrashtanumantas, which is actually described further on in this chapter, in chapter 13. He's the overseer and permitter. He watches what the living entity wants, and if he likes, he will empower the body to act in accordance with that desire. If not, The body won't even cooperate, what to speak of the universe. So there won't be any cooperation. He's the overseer and permitter. And so it's described in Vedic literature that there are two birds in the tree of the body. There's the supreme, the super soul, or Paramatma, and there's the individual soul. The supreme is the witnessing bird, and the individual is the eating bird. We are trying to enjoy the material world, and the super soul is watching us. And because the nature of the material world, this is a place of free will, sometimes the super soul accommodates our not so good desires. He allows us to do them. And even if we have downright sinful and awful desires, he sometimes allows us to carry them out. He tries to stop us, but if we're very committed to wrong behavior, he'll finally allow us to carry out the wrong behavior, knowing that the karma that comes from it is not his, it's ours. So this is the nature of the Supreme. We are similar to him in many, many, many ways, but we're also very different from him in some important ways also. So we are one with and different. Now, I'll see if there's any questions about some of those things that we said today. Yes, Jamuna.
You said that we're not even in control of the small body,
That's right.
but most people will disagree.
Right, right. And Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita.
So they would think that, well, I'm in control, I can move my head east, west, north, south, I can do what I want to do, I can aspire for things, I can go have an education, I can fulfill my desire, maybe
Right,
some
right.
desire might be fulfilled, but that's okay, that's just bad luck, circumstances will change, so we're in control.
Use the, it's not a pointer.
So we're in control.
Yeah, we appear to be in control. And Krishna says, kartaham iti manyate. We think we're in control. What appears to be happening is we desire and our arm moves. What's actually happening is we desire, the super soul sees that desire and accomplishes the movement of the arm. Because there are people who have a stroke, or people who have some kind of neurological dysfunction, and they can't even move their arms or legs. They're unable to do that. So this is a common misconception, and Krishna talks about it a lot, that we think we're the doer, but actually the doer is in one sense material nature. But the doer beyond material nature is actually the Supreme Lord, who is Upadrasta Anumanta. He's the witnessing bird, and he's the one who cooperates with the desire of the living entity and gets material nature to act. So we do not have to believe that, but in fact it's true. And if you actually... I was thinking about talking about this, and there's not much time, so I won't get into it very deeply. But medical science and also cognitive science has really come up with a lot of information that makes no sense from a material point of view in the everyday world. To give you a couple of indications of what I'm talking about, that scientists have done extensive study in how the eyes work, how the electrical impulses go into the brain. They fan out into a number of different regions, and these regions give us the experience we call sight. Now, the ears, they also turn into electrical signals, and they go to different regions of the brain, and they give us the idea we call sound. Now, technically, this experience of sound, this experience of sight, is called qualia. That's a very strange word that most people have never heard. but it's the actual experience of seeing or hearing something. Now, visual stimulus, the photons, they move at the speed of light. And audio moves at Mach 1 because it's the speed of sound, which is very different. Sound is much slower. That we know that if you see some lightning flash far, far away, you'll hear the sound somewhat later because the lightning, the visual spark you see first, and then the sound comes to you. Now, when we go inside the body, we're talking about these electrical impulses. These electrical impulses, they do not travel even at the speed of sound. They travel much, much slower than that. And we all know, because they've done a lot of research into, like for instance, we have video screen like this one. And the amount of information that it takes to make a single image is huge. But the amount of information it takes to make a sound recording is only a fraction of that. If you've ever done audio or video recording, you'll find that video files are in the gigabyte range, whereas audio files, unless they're very, very long, much less than that. So how is it that in the local immediate area we see things and hear them at the same time? It shouldn't be like that, because it takes much more processing to process a visual image than it does for a audio image. Yet when I snap my fingers, we hear and see it at the same time. I mean, if we're lightning, we're, like miles away, that's a whole different thing. But if we're in the same room, we shouldn't be able to do that. And they've done research on sports figures, somebody playing football like soccer or, American gridiron, or someone playing baseball. They throw a ball, and that ball takes, I think, 0.4 seconds to go from the pitcher to the person who's batting. That is way too little time for how slow our nerves work, because the way our nerves process electrical signals, they have to jump across synapses. And I think the nerve impulses proceed at something like 250 miles an hour, which is fast, but it's nothing like the speed of light. When I'm recording on this video, that's happening at the speed of light. Those electrical pulses are moving at the speed of light. But in our body, it moves much slower. Yet, a batter in American baseball can hit the ball. He should not have enough time to be able to process it. So now modern researchers are telling us that we actually live, several milliseconds, or actually several hundred milliseconds in the past. That's how they're suggesting that this works. But obviously there's something fishy about this whole thing. That there are many things that don't make sense about the way our brains function. So we are in a machine, and we sense things, but it's not all coming just through our sensory channels. There's something else going on. And another thing that makes no sense is there is a medical condition called encephalopathy, or let's see. Yeah, I think it's encephalopathy or something like that it's called. And this is a condition they used to call water on the brain, but that's not actually what it is. It's water and no brain. So people who have this condition, and there are not a lot of people that have it, people who have this condition means that if you're in a dark room and you hold a candle or a light on one side of their head, you can see right through their head because there's no brain there, or mostly no brain there. Now, you would suppose that a person like this would be totally unfunctional, but they've discovered people like this going to college. So what's going on there? You know, like some large proportion, 60 or 70% of their gray matter is missing, but they're leading an ordinary life. But there are many things like that. These are mysteries that they scientists find in how we see the world. So something more spooky than just electrons, or rather photons, hitting the eyes and turning into electrical impulses and getting decoded in the brain. Something more is going on than that. So we are learning that Krishna is the overseer and permitter, and we're learning how to properly focus our lives on Krishna. I mean, somebody really wants to try to enjoy this world and they don't want to serve Krishna. Good luck. You know, I was like that myself for a long time. I didn't think that it was actually going to be so nice being a servant of somebody. But actually, over time, I've started to realize that's the only game in town. And it's actually much more interesting than you would ever think. I think that generally most religions have this idea you're standing and very rigid and you're doing something very simplistic. But Krishna is weirder than that, you know, much weirder. He engage in all kinds of pastimes. You never know what's coming around the corner because he's a great playwright. He comes up with some amazing scripts. So at any rate, I'll leave that with you on the idea. Anyone else have a quick question, because we're getting late on time?
A
Yeah.
follow-up idea to that. Being the knower or not knowing also can mean that we don't know what's best for us.
Right. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we are. We don't know why we're here. We don't know where we're going. We don't know where we should go. We don't know what's good and what isn't. And so people are surrounded by ignorance on every side. And only a few people make the effort to try to understand what really is going on here. And there's so many wrong answers out there. So you can, try so many different things. And many of those answers aren't completely wrong. They're just somewhat wrong. Some parts are right and some parts are not right. But the Vedic literature does tie it all together in a seamless and complete way, and it does deal with every detail, which you do not find in other philosophical systems. So again, kartaham iti manyate. We think we're the doer, and we think we know something, but both things are false. We know something, and we may know a lot of misconceptions. At the same time, we think we're doing things when in fact it's material nature acting according to our desires. And when we learn about this, we learn that's what makes us different from God. So that's why this 13th chapter is there. That's why we learn who God is, what He is, and we learn how we're the same as God because we're particles of God, but we're not the full God. We're only a piece. All right. So we're going to have to stop there.